Welcome, everybody, to part two of lesson four here as we start talking about World War II and the beginnings of Adolf Hitler coming to power in Germany. Maybe for some of you, the Russian Rev was the thing that kind of caught your attention. This might be a little bit tougher, but for some of you, maybe you've been looking forward to World War II. Again, just kind of depends on what your focus is. But want to go ahead and begin laying the groundwork for the rise of Hitler. Adolf Hitler was a soldier during World War One, had kind of found his footing there. Many of you guys know he had applied for art school and gotten denied and felt bitter about that. There were a lot of things I think in his life that he felt bitter about. But after he was a soldier in World War One and was defeated as part of the Central Powers, Hitler was going to become very, very angry about the fact that his side had lost. You can see him down in the picture in the lower part there of the screen. I'd be interested if you guys were able to pick him out. The X above his head maybe is going to be a tall or a telltale sign. If you see it there, it's a white X above his head. Even though, as we're looking at this time coming out of World War I in the 20s, that was a pretty good time for the world. But then moving into the 30s, as you look, this was a hard time. That was the Great Depression era within the United States, which you guys will learn more about next year. And even though we had it really tough in Europe, it was far worse. They had hosted, if you will, World War I, and the economy was really struggling there. And as a result of that, the desperation on the part of the European people, specifically the Germans, they were looking for salvation. They were looking for something to go right that would allow them to be pulled up and out of their current state. At the end of the war, Hitler is going to join what is known as the Nazi Party. In elongated form, it's the National Socialist Party. And as a result of that, he begins his meteoric rise toward the top and is going to be in control of the party. One of the things that he starts speaking out about is who he is blaming, for what is going to be in front of them. And I want you to be aware of three things. The first thing he blames is going to be the Versailles Treaty. He said that the Germans had been done dirty as that was negotiated, that because of that war guilt that we talked about at the end of World War I, the Germans had gotten a raw deal and it was going to now put them in a place that they could hardly recover from. The second thing that he is going to point to as a point of blame is going to be the Jews. We'll be talking about them quite a bit more in the days ahead, but the Jews were going to be the second group that he blamed. And finally, he blamed the government, this Weimar Republic that had taken over, that had now seized control of Germany. He said basically that they had been an abject failure. This was going to be their fault as well. So those three things, the treaty, the Jews, and the government, the Weimar Republic, were going to be blamed for what was now facing things in Germany. He said, we're going to take over. His goal was to take over the government and hopefully, in his vision, see Germany rise back to its rightful place at the top of the pile. He believed that they ought to be a world power, and his ambition was going to help them, or was to help them get back on track. Hitler saw the first target on his list as an area called Bavaria. He and his fellow believers in this movement said, we're going to go take over Bavaria. Well, unfortunately for them, that was a failed attempt called the Beer Hall Putsch, but it was going to fail miserably. And because of that, he is going to be sent to prison. It's a house prison. It is in no way, shape, or form close to solitary confinement. It's a fairly cozy place if you're going to be in prison, but it's there that he writes his book, this manifesto that is going to spell out his hatred for everybody, it seems, and everything, particularly one group. But that book is going to be called Mein Kampf, or My Struggle. This is going to be the blueprint that will carry him forward for the rest of his days. And in that, he said that the German people were the master race. They were the Aryan race. Now, we've talked perhaps in other classes, maybe you guys have, about the Aryan race characteristics, the blonde hair, blue eyes. For some of you, that's going to describe you to a T. For others, maybe not. What's ironic, though, and you can't see it because it's black and white, but Hitler was anything but that. But many people in Germany fit that description. And so he said the Volk, which we'll talk about later, are going to rise up being this Aryan master race. The one who are going to be the lowest on the food chain are going to be the Jews. But now we're going to see this group of people rising up and ruling in what was going to be known as the Third Reich. After the Treaty of Versailles, which we have talked about fairly extensively, we're going to see the people in Germany specifically, their lives beginning to turn upside down. And even as I've been prepping for this, it's been interesting just to think about our world right now and the tumult that is seemingly around every corner on the news, whatever. And some of these characteristics, in no way am I saying this is the direction we're going, but it's interesting to think about how people have reacted even during this time. Food's going to be scarce. You imagine people lining up, as you can see here. This is going to be more at a bank because the economy is failing too. Even as I record this, you guys perhaps are aware that the stock market did a lot better today after what's been happening in Congress. There was an agreement to be a stimulus package, but the economy took a rebound today. We'll see how things go. But at this point, food is scarce, the economy is failing, and the government's going to be failing. It's weak and it's divided. As you perhaps have looked at our government, it seems that, especially in the Senate right now, very little agreement, both sides bickering with each other. It's going to be very much, as Lincoln said, a house divided. So, anyhow, that's what's going to be facing the Germans. People are frustrated, people are angry, and they're looking for somebody to blame. They're looking for someone to blame. So often when things don't go well, we are going to look for someone or something to blame. But I think the flip side of that coin is also looking for something to be hopeful in. Instead of being angry and bitter, I think even when we're in that place, we also want to see hope. What else is out there that we can believe in? And as Hitler came to power, it seemed that his timing couldn't have been better. This was the ideal time for him to be able to rise to power for the people, to have someone to look to at this point. The Nazis overall had been a fairly small group. They hadn't been a dominant political force in Germany, but as Hitler began to rise, as these things seemed to be spiraling, the Nazis are going to begin to grow because of his charisma, because of his leadership. And as he presents a message of hope, the group that he lays the majority of the blame on, even though we've looked at the three groups prior, but now he's going to focus in on the one group, which is going to be the Jews. He essentially says it is their fault. They have been ripping us off in banking. They have been manipulating society to the point where now things have spiraled, even pointing at the Versailles Treaty and saying that there were Jewish individuals that were kind of masterminding the whole thing. As a result of this, he said it is now going to be their fault, and we now need to go after them because of what they have done to us. Ironically, even Christianity, which had been a mainstay in Germany up to this point, is going to be diminished. One of the main things that he points to is that Christianity is going to be, in his mind, a Jewish invention. What's ironic is a lot of the Jews, when Christianity was coming up, looked at faith and said, like, we don't agree with it. However, many of the early followers, including Jesus, was going to be Jewish. And because of that, Hitler said, we don't want any part of it. We're going to strip that from our culture. Now, there was still a church within Germany, not a single church, but the church within Germany. But in many ways, many of them were going to be weak and beholden to Hitler. One of the main things that many Germans had set up to this point was Grüß Gott. Instead of, hey, how's it going? How are things in your life? What's happening? They would say, Grüß Gott, God be with you. Hello. And instead of being greeted by that anymore, it was expected that they would now greet people with Heil Hitler, essentially saying Hitler is our leader. This is going to now be the main focus of everyday life within Germany. There's going to be a church that's established, but like I said, it's going to be weak. And overall, there's not going to be much faith happening in the German church at that point. Hitler said this, and this is something that we'll finish with today. He said, we need to now, as a dictator, if I'm going to be in charge, this is something that needs to happen. We need to get people to buy into the big lie. And the big lie is going to have a few different parts that I'd like you to be aware of. First of all, you need to make the lie big. Germany is struggling. Germany is falling apart, and it's going to be one group's fault. It's huge. That's not a small thing, that's a big thing. He said, make it simple. You can't blame multiple groups. You can't have all of these factors that are coming together. It's going to be a failing economy, failing country, and it's going to be the Jews' fault. Make it big, keep it simple, and then this is the big thing, repeat it. Keep saying it. If you follow those three tenets, he said, eventually the people will believe it. Make it big, keep it simple, and then repeat it, repeat it, repeat it. He said, if you do those things, the big lie will be in place, and the German people will start buying in with this. Well, this is going to set the stage for what we'll be looking at to wrap up our week and how this is going to play out within German society. I'll see you guys then. I hope you have a great rest of the midweek point.